Jared, talking about Mid-South Wrestling, as we have been, so many of the stars of the next generation got their first big break, the first chance at a main event spot, their first track record of drawing money in Mid-South Wrestling. And it certainly was like that for me in the Midnight Express. And I mean, Dennis had been wrestling at that time for about 12 years, and Bobby for about 8 years. And I was, a newbie, but by the time we got finished with that main event run and setting those records, we could pretty much get booked anywhere we wanted to. And the same thing happened with guys like DiBiase and Junkyard Dog and the Freebirds and so many other individuals. Part of it was the College of Wrestling Knowledge type of atmosphere that Watts gave off, where if you wanted to study the business there, you definitely could. And part of it was the fact that, to be honest, those young, hungry guys were the only ones that would do that schedule and beat their bodies up in order to get over and see those massive crowds. But one way or another, you had really young guys drawing major league level crowds, 10,000 in the Myriad in Oklahoma City, 20-something thousand in the Superdome. It was a great training ground, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And let's be honest, I'm sure that a lot of the guys came there because they knew they had the potential with a lot of miles, a lot of hard work, nothing wrong with either of those things. It goes along with the territory, no pun intended, to make a good living. But the other thing that their bookers or the people that sent them there would tell them, either very aggressively, like, an Eddie Graham type guy or somebody like that, or Vern Gagne, or Jerry Jarrett. I don't know how Jarrett looked at Watts' work. And with that, hey, you're going to learn a lot there. You're going to work every night. You're going to work at least 6 nights a week, maybe 7. You're going to get great education, great coaching, and you're going to be able to help establish your body of work. He's going to give you the freedom to express yourself. He's going to give you great leadership and direction. There's structure there, and that's necessary, because it's necessary in the fact that you're going to be expected to be on time. You're going to expect to be come to work not impaired. You're not going to be able to phone things in and be lazy, take a day off type thing in the ring in front of a paying customer. The territory is well established, all those things. So it sets it up for a new guy to come in there and do extremely well. I think Dusty always had eyes on using Magnum TA as a top guy. And with the Dusty Flair rivalry, Dusty as the booker for Crockett at the time, always looking for someone that, and not that it's a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it's quite frankly very strategic. Who's going to be the next Ric Flair? So who's going to be the next top guy? Which is, if I am a booker, I am looking for that every day. I'm not looking to get rid of the top guy I have now or the top guys in a territory. I just know that my business is going to perpetuate, and somewhere down the road, I've got to replace some guys. I got to get new people to fill those roles as the leading man in the movie. So that's how I think a lot of guys came there, knowing that it wasn't going to be their home territory, but it was going to be a viable stop in their journey in building a body of work in their career. So,
well, and that's the way the business used to work also, is that the bookers and the promoters of the different territories, they would know, they would be cognizant of what was going on in their business, in their profession. So when they would hear that, oh my God, Bill Watts just drew 20-something thousand people in the Superdome last weekend, or Bill Watts just drew so-and-so 10,000, 12,000 people in the Sam Houston Coliseum, or business is on fire in that territory because he's working with these young kids called the Freebirds, whoever the fuck they may be. Or who's the Midnight Express? We've never heard of them before, but they're selling out in Louisiana, and that would make every booker cognizant of who those guys were. And we had the opportunity, the Midnight Express and I, not only did we get booked against Dusty. It's supposed to be Dusty and Dog had left. It ended up being Dusty and Sonny King, so that was a rough match. But we worked with Dusty in the Superdome against him. We were on a bunch of the same cards and in the locker room with Ric Flair when he would see these houses and see the Midnight Express on top. So we had, luckily, both Dusty and Ric Flair going back to Jimmy Crockett independently going, you need to bring the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette in here because they're drawing big houses.
Right.
And so when guys would see, DiBiase and Dog had that tremendous series, and Hacksaw Duggan all of a sudden becomes a top name. And obviously JYD, not only was he not the greatest performer in the ring, as everybody's talked about, but he had that charisma, and he was perfect for the territory. But he became a guy who could make shots in all the other promoters' big towns off of his legend in the Mid-South. And it was just such a place to learn from top to bottom.
Well, Dog was a unique character in that Bill's trust in Ernie Ladd, Bill's own vision. The thing that Dog had that nobody can deny is that Dog had charisma. And charisma is the one thing that a booker cannot teach. I've always, at least my philosophy is, you can't smell it, you can't manufacture it. Some guys have it or they don't have it. So it is the it factor is important. So Dog had charisma, and Bill made sure that Dog was protected and got the most out of him. So, and he was a man of color. That was unique too at that time, that a guy top star was a man of color.
Well, I remember I did an interview years ago with Bill, a sit-down video interview for Ring of Honor, and he told the story about when Ernie Ladd, when Dog had first come in, Bill decided that Junkyard Dog was going to be the top star before he made his debut, and Ernie Ladd was his booker. And so Bill sent Dog to wrestle Super Destroyer Scott Irwin.
Yeah.
I think it was in the St. Bernard building in New Orleans, and then he called the next day, called Ernie to get the report, and Ernie said, "Well, Bill, your boy ain't got it." "What do you mean?" "Well, just to see what he could do, I put him through 20 minutes with Super Destroyer, and his tongue was hanging out like a long red necktie." And Bill said, "You're fired." And Ernie said, "And then what?" He said, "You're fired. You're my booker. I didn't hire you to find out what he can't do. I hired you to show people what he can do. He should have beaten Irwin in 3 minutes. You're fired." And Ernie was like, "Point taken, boss. Point taken." And then he hired him back sometime later.
He fired. The only time that I can ever recall a match being retaped because it was not good was one night in Shreveport when Ernie and Bill booked the Dog to work with Lynn Denton, the grappler. And Lynn Denton was, a hell of a hand, very sound fundamentally, and probably one of the more underutilized off-the-radar talents in the business for the last several generations, just to really, except in Portland where he was a huge star. But he was really good, I thought. And Bill worked had a match on TV where the thing about watch a television show, nothing was a throwaway. Every segment of every 1 hour show, all 6 segments, every second of every segment had significance, had importance. So Bill booked Grappler against Ernie, or against Dog, and Grappler, in one of his first nights in, wanted to show the bookers and the owner what he could do, and he out-wrestled Dog and took him down and went behind him and waist-locked him, and I was on commentary, and I knew that wasn't what Bill wanted, but I couldn't deviate too far from what I was seeing on the monitor, or I would be, it would not be Mid-South style. But I didn't put Grappler over to the big. I kept trying to find superlatives to talk about Dog, and the old deal. I'm wondering if JYD is just lulling the Grappler, who's obviously a tremendous mat wrestler, into a false sense of security, because this match could end on one thump or one clothesline or whatever, just trying to protect Dog. So anyway, that was the first hour of the show, of the 2 hours we're doing. And I remember we made that long walk from the announcer position in the Irishman deal. Remember up those stairs?
Oh, yeah. Way across there was a basketball floor type thing in the club, and then there was a long flight of stairs, which if you were blown up by the time you got at the top, you'd almost be ready to have a stroke.
Yeah, and Boyd Pierce was working with me at the time, as I recall, and we took our headsets off when the show was over, and we knew that our biggest star had not had his most stellar television. And Boyd looked at me and he said, "Well, are you ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "We're about to make the longest walk in the business." So we walked into a hornet's nest, and Bill yelled at me to come back into that little back room with him and Ernie. And he actually put me over. He said, "If it hadn't been for the kid here, our top star would have sounded like he looked." He said, and he fired Ernie again that night, and fired Lynn down the first night in the territory. And so it was agreed upon that we would come back at the beginning of the second hour before we did our open, and Reeser Bowden, the ring announcer, the old booth announcer at KTBS Channel 3 in Shreveport, the charismatic Reeser Bowden would announce to the fans that the Grappler has demanded a rematch with a Junkyard Dog because of partial officiating or some crazy storyline that Reeser could get out. And so we had, then here comes the Grappler, and here comes then the Dog's music, and they have like a 3 to 4 minute match, which is what it should have been to start with, like you were talking about with Super Destroyer. And JY went over strong and beat him with the thump in the middle of the ring, and Lynn Denton flew like he was an airplane, and it was absolutely perfect what they needed. So Lynn Denton kept his job after that performance, got rehired in a matter of about 20 minutes. Ernie got rehired as a booker, and we all lived happily ever after. And then we started our next show. And the fans never knew anything any different. Now, the match that aired on television, obviously, was the one that we retaped. And that's the only time that I can ever recall us retaping a match in the Irishman deal because of a poor performance or any reason. So that was Bill's deal. Bill had this uncanny ability as a booker to identify the definitive strengths of a talent, and to also identify the definitive weaknesses of a talent. And then he would construct and erect his programs, his character development, and their exposure to television and in these house shows based on their strengths, not on their weaknesses. And it sounds so simplistic, but I think today. Do you think that it's so simple that people got away from it because they were like, well, it can't be this easy. There has to be something more to it. Oh, yeah.
So we'll make something more to it.
I think there's a lot of things in the business today that people have gotten away from because they look at it as being too simplistic, or it's too wrestling, or it's too old school, or it's too whatever. And I get on Twitter. I get some wise asses every now and then. And right before I block them, I normally cut a little promo on them in 140 characters when they accuse me of being embedded. When they say, "Hey, old man, you're embedded in Southern wrestling," and a lot of us don't give two shits for Southern wrestling. So I said, okay, before I block you, which I will momentarily, I explained that Southern wrestling sold emotion, reality, and passion, and the fact that the same wrestling that made wrestling good in the South made it also good in a lot of other territories that damn sure weren't Southern. They did basic, fundamental, believable wrestling in the AWA at one time, and I know last I looked, unless you live in Nome, Alaska, Minnesota ain't south of anything.
But I'll second that emotion.
So that's kind of, I think a lot of guys and a lot of companies have this crazed obsession to reinvent the wheel, and it isn't hard. And for those who say that, the line between good and evil, between baby faces and heels, is almost non-existent.
Oh.
I watched a match the other night on Raw that they had Brodus Clay and Tensai, who are been positioned as baby faces, against Ron Killings, R-Truth, and Xavier Woods. So, and who's also baby faces. So they had a little issue. They shot in a backstage segment on SmackDown with Brodus Clay and Woods. They got like 2 minutes at a time, period, for Brodus to make a quasi heel turn. But when you get them in the ring, the fans didn't know who to cheer or who to boo. So they just sat there. They had no emotional investment. I don't really hate these guys, so why should I boo them? Well, if you eliminate boos,
but on the other hand, they don't really want to cheer the one team because they kind of like the other team.
Exactly. You got to have protagonists and antagonists. We have them in our everyday lives. We have them in world politics. We have them in relationships. We have them to every degree in every relationship and walk of life known to man. And from promoters to not parlay the 7 deadly sins that will always be around as long as people have a conscience, and that's how their DNA is. There's good people and there's bad people. That's why they have prisons. The last I looked, some people I can't say, well, that would be like me making an argument. Well, Corny, all these guys in prison aren't really bad guys. Those guys on death row, you can't really say that they're totally bad. They love their mom.
They could have some redeeming qualities, but
exactly.
That's the same reason why those people aren't on top in wrestling. Because in TNA one time, Vince Russo was going on about the babyface heel thing is over with, and of course this is also when he was the Christian thing going on, and Dutch Mantell said, "Well, Vince, if you believe there ain't no heels and ain't no babyfaces, you ought to read this book I read about it." Oh, they wrote a book about it? Yeah, they did, Vince. What's it called? The Bible.
Exactly. Yeah, there he goes. Yeah, that's right.
And Jerry Jarrett had a tremendous analogy. Jerry Jarrett would come out with just one line sometimes of just wisdom. Like I brought Brian Hildebrand to a show one time. He talked about the kayfabe rule. Mark Curtis, back before he had become a mainstream name as a referee, but he was refereeing, had refereed for Jarrett's partner Buddy Fuller, and was taking
really
pictures, etc. And I brought him in the back door of the building, and Jerry Jarrett came up to me and said, "Who's that?" I said, "Oh, he's a friend of mine. He's smart." Hey, he said, he cut me off. He said, "He may be smart to the business, but he's not smart to my business." Well, Jerry Jarrett also used to draw an analogy. If you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden you see pulled over on the side of the road, these two guys have had this issue, a road rage issue, and there's a big guy and a little guy. And they just start fighting, and that big guy is pounding the piss out of that little guy. And you stop, and you're thinking, like, should I help? And, oh, geez, what should I do? God, he's going to kill that little guy. And all of a sudden, that little guy starts firing up and makes the biggest comeback and starts beating that big guy's ass, and the big guy starts running off. You start cheering, yeah, get him, get him. It's natural human emotion. You have to side in a conflict.
It is. It's exactly that, and we were talking about those are the lessons, fundamental lessons that Watts taught guys like Magnum TA, and, he made Terry Taylor from a mid-card babyface. I revoiced a bunch of matches on that Legends of Mid-South DVD the Tuesday after WrestleMania 29. And it was kind of a work on me that, hey, we need you to come in and do some voiceovers for some of these matches that didn't have commentary, that had been shot with a handheld. And I said, okay, great. I look forward to it. Well, little did I know it was going to be like a 10-hour day of doing commentary by myself. And, of course, they weren't just picking out matches that were enhancement-type matches. These are all the main event level matches, and one of them was a 42-minute match from the Dome with Ric Flair and Terry Taylor. And so I called that 42-minute match by myself. And the match was based around Terry Taylor trying to win the NWA title. He was the hottest babyface, as hot, arguably. It's just about anybody in Mid-South at that time. And Bill wanted to move him up a notch. And he moved him up a notch by him doing a job in the Superdome to Ric Flair. Which some people are going to hear this and say, well, how could that happen? That was illogical. That doesn't make any sense. But the story that they told, the music that they wrote, and the lyrics that I was lucky enough to be able to provide was elevated Terry Taylor, because I knew what my role was. I knew Flair was going to beat Terry Taylor and was going to leave the Dome as the NWA champion, but I also knew that Terry Taylor was going to come so close. And somewhere, I don't know when, I don't know where, but somewhere, wink, wink, we're booking these at the house shows, somewhere, sometime, don't be surprised if you pick up your newspaper or you turn on your news and they're telling you that Terry Taylor just beat Ric Flair to become the coveted NWA champion. That was the story. So, and they built that whole match because allegedly, according to Terry Taylor's story on the DVD, Flair was partying in Bourbon Street most of the night and was really hungover, and they worked the whole match. They didn't work out any spots. They didn't talk before the show. They didn't have to have an agent, a producer, and a writer.
The locker rooms in the Superdome weren't even together. You never saw your opponent before.
No. And so they went out and worked a hammerlock match. And so that's another one that somebody listening to this young is going to roll their eyes and say, well, there's no way you can convince me that a match surrounding a hammerlock for 40-plus minutes can be anything but bad. It's going to suck pond water. Well, the only thing I can suggest to you is to get your hands on the DVD and sit down without being on your iPhone or without multitasking on your iPad or scratching your eyeballs or anything else, and watch the match and listen to the story and see if you're not totally impressed. And those are the kind of things that Bill could strategize and work out. Because if you're just in today's marketplace, okay, we're going to take one of our top guys, we're going to bring a guy in from out of the territory, we're going to have our biggest show of the year, and our top guy is going to lose 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring, and we're going to get him over. What? Hey, wait a minute. There's a disconnect. So that's what I look at wrestling. I look at wrestling today, Corny, and that's me. If you're not skilled enough, talented enough as a worker, as a producer, as an agent, as a booker, as an owner, as anything in the business, that you aren't versed enough to know how to lose, to make yourself better, then you cannot claim that you are a skilled artisan of the craft and the art form of being a professional wrestler. You do not know your craft if you are unable to get over to the crowd in a losing effort.
Well, during one of the Cowboys meetings at TV that I always paid attention to, he said to all the guys, he said, if you come to work, if you come to the show without a way to win or a way to lose already in your head for your match that night, then you're like a carpenter that came to work without his toolkit.
Exactly.
You didn't come prepared. And here's another thing, guys don't understand sometimes that you can win the third or fourth match on the card every night for a year, and great, you never lost a match. You were the third or fourth match. Or you can wrestle that main event against somebody that people think is one of the greatest wrestlers in the world or the greatest wrestler in the world, give him a hell of a fight, almost come out on top, have an out in there somewhere where if it had just gone a different way at that one climactic point, then things would have been different. And you're more over and you're more recognized as a top guy than you are before. It used to be that guys could, but once again, the business was structured more properly in those days. The business was more credible in those days, and everything. I remember when I was a kid and I was a wrestling fan, I instantly knew the rules of wrestling. When somebody broke a rule in the ring, I instantly knew what it was and how they had done it, and gosh, the referee either saw it or he didn't see it. And now you've got chaos, and there are no rules, and nobody understands it.
Well, yeah, and look, I'm not going as far as saying that taking up the mats on the outside of the ring and coming off the top rope is barred.
Let's go back to short boots and wool tights.
Yeah, when Bill did that in WCW, which most people don't understand, he didn't want guys not to ever come off the top rope. He just wanted it to be it's such a dangerous move that if a heel could get away with it, or the occasional babyface skullduggery, and it went unnoticed by the referee, it got more heat for the heels on one simple move. That was the logic behind that. But one of my biggest complaints right now is so simple. How in a wrestling match you can allow clenched fists to be legal is an absurdity in my view. Now that may dictate. I may get more tweets when somebody hears your podcast. Oh, JR, that old fart, that old bastard, Southern wrestling hillbilly redneck, crooked face. No wonder he's not on television anymore. He's so damn far behind times that he believes that a clenched fist should be illegal in a wrestling match. Well, think about what you just said. It's a clenched fist. We're having a wrestling match. We aren't in the UFC. We aren't in boxing. We are in the quote-unquote wrestling business. So those things, like choking, well, the only reason that choking isn't allowed in WWE or anywhere else, TNA or Ring of Honor, is because they don't want the younger fans to get to emulate a working chokehold, because a 9-year-old don't know how to work, and they don't want someone. I'm surprised that the UFC does it. You know, that the UFC's got such a adult-oriented audience I'm shocked that some do-gooder group hasn't complained about a rear naked choke. I don't want my fourth grader to be exercising a rear naked choke on his third grade brother. Well, hey, asshole, why don't you become a parent and watch what your kids are doing? You know, it would take my dad one time to tell me what not to do.
Yeah, put the rear naked choke on your sister and see what happens, you
exactly.
Little shit. But now here with punches and wrestling, JR, the problem is guys punch so shitty these days. They can do triple flips off the top rope. They can't throw a punch. That basically all it is I'm going to punch you 5 times in the face while I'm backing you up to shoot you off to do another half-line thing. So they might not really ought to sell them anyway. But here's the question. Where do guys go at this point? Is it just a lost art form? There are schools and training centers, and obviously there's OVW here in Louisville, and there's the Performance Center in Orlando, and et cetera, but are we just too far gone with trying to make this stuff make any sense? Can guys actually learn? You can teach a trained chimpanzee to do moves, but you can't teach him to figure out what order to put them in and why he should do them. Is there any way I'm asking 20 million questions here. Is there any way for guys to learn these days without actually going out in front of people night after night and doing it? And there's so few places to do that. Are we just cooked?
No, I think I think it's imperative that no matter the size of the crowd, the best way to learn is to, I'm a big proponent of the WWE Performance Center. The WWE Performance Center is basically a shiny, enhanced version of those developmental territories that we started back in the 90s in WWE, when we kept rebooking the same pain in the ass stars that had baggage and were entitled and that locked up like old women and things like that. That I wanted to change as the head of talent relations and get back to a different culture in the locker room, more competitiveness, give some guys some new chances to break through, and create more competition. But I was lucky enough to get some guys that either had some territory experience or had great motivation or had great aptitude. You know, The Rock had never worked a territory, And even though my hiring of The Rock was not looked at favorably in upper management from the get-go, or originally, I should say, and more specifically, it looks as if he turned out okay. But the bottom line of it is, to answer your question, is that I believe that with a combination of the weight training and the rules and the structure in place, with the right coaches, always, that's where it starts, the Performance Center is a very, very good idea. I do think that for the Performance Center to produce the stars, future stars, that WWE, for in this case, needs to perpetuate its success, the Performance Center also needs to run a lot of live events. And they're not going to make a lot of money, if any, on the live events, but they're making money on them in the long run by having their talents work in front of a live audience. So what I would suggest in a perfect world for them, just using them as an example, is to have your training sessions, I like the fact they've hired a strength and conditioning coach, which I fully endorse, because that takes us back to my mainstream sports roots, that you can get guys stronger and more fit without it being artificially done. It can be done through hard work and nutrition, and they can change their body if they choose to get stronger and healthier if they're taught how to do that, and they work on it on a regular basis. But they have to have spot shows. And I think that, at least, I left WWE on September the 11th, ironically. And so when I left, the goal was to run more spot shows and more little markets, but it was going to all fit in when NXT got on a mainstream television deal. So what I think is going to happen, Corny, is once WWE negotiates their new TV deal, it will include NXT. I'm talking off the top of my head here. I don't have any inside information. But if NXT is a part of the package of getting it on national TV, then in that region, you could theoretically go to Georgia and run Macon, Columbus, Albany, that type deal. A spot show here and there, small markets, which weren't small to us back in the day, but they may see a WWE show once a year. But if this show's on television and is programmed properly, these are where these kids need to go. And WWE's not going to make any cash on the running the event, more than likely, but they're going to see the results down the road when these guys learn to work in front of a live audience, which is an absolute necessity to be successful in our business, which is why the territories produce so many major stars. Those guys had a chance to go off Broadway, do their act in front of a live audience, no matter the size, no matter the region or the time zone, and they learned how to perform. They learned how to entertain and engage that audience.
How much of it do you think also is the difference in the guys today, the generations? Professional wrestling always lent itself to the cowboy, the guy who didn't like to follow the rules, was not a conformist, etc. Dusty Rhodes, Dick Murdoch, they were roommates with a mule at one point. When they worked for Vern Gagne. You hear all the crazy stories that we've told of all the crazy wrestlers. And guys, now, obviously, you don't make waves with the instant communication. Don't say the wrong thing on Twitter. Don't get people mad at you. Because they have a tendency to spend twittering twittering after midnight is not a good thing. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times, I think that it's almost like guys they're self-conscious. They don't want to break out of their shell and do that shit. I mean, Michael Hayes and the Freebirds got over because they were Michael Hayes and the Freebirds, and they ran through a few territories where they would get fired instantly for the same reasons that made them big stars once they got there. The guys these days, I don't know whether A, they have it in their personalities, and B, I don't know if it's tolerated if they do to be the outlandish, larger-than-life, colorful character that used to get over in pro wrestling.
I agree. I said this a lot of times, and it's really a simplistic statement, but the greatest stars that I've known, and I've seen were extensions of their own personality. Yeah, they were enhanced and they were showbizzed up, and as Austin used to say, he just added a little bit of volume to who he actually was. If I called Austin right now, or you have Austin on your podcast, you're going to hear the same Steve Austin that you heard on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, exactly. I talked to him on the phone 2 weeks ago, and it was the same game. It was the same. It was only longer.
Yeah, and it's not going to be quite as loud with the volume because he's not talking to an arena. He's talking to a telephone or a computer. But he sounds exactly like the same guy. The Rock came from a trash-talking university known for its trash-talking in the University of Miami and down in Florida. All he was an extension of his trash-talking self when he got into the ring. And he was blessed with supreme confidence. And, Rock loved him some Rock. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was perfect for what we needed. But for a novice, for a writer who has no product knowledge or no real true life experiences, to try to cast someone in a role that the person is absolutely a lousy fit, creates a lousy fit. I'm waiting. I'm kind of a fan of Wade Barrett. I think Wade Barrett could be a very sound traditional villain in North America. He has a look. He's kind of got that William Regal royalty feel, of aristocratic feel. But by looking at him, the little crooked nose there, it's might be a tough bastard. There's a little something more to the story than meets the eye. Then now they got him coming out doing Bad News Barrett, where he gives you, well, here's the good news and here's the bad news. And the audience, by the second time he did it in Oklahoma City the other night, they were kind of rolling their eyes, it felt like. Now, I am of the position, without somebody saying, well, JR hates the Wade Barrett gimmick. I don't hate it. I just don't know if it's going to work. And I'm not emotionally invested in it enough, yay or nay, but I am willing, for Wade Barrett's sake, to give it a chance to work, because I like the guy. And I think that he can be booked to be a major contributor. Again, if I were booking any territory, if I was overseeing or writing any television show, I'm not going to tell you we're going to dumb it down, but if my ass is on the line, then we're going to change the philosophy and get back to where things aren't eyeball rolling and we're not doing sophomoric humor, which amazes me.
Wasn't no fart jokes?
No, well, hey, if somebody farted for real, I got no problem having a laugh at it. But the next thing you know, somebody's going to come out there and with a fart machine.
There's a whoopee cushion, yeah.
Whoopee cushion, and so that's what amazes me about when I do watch TNA, and I'm all for TNA succeeding. I have friends there that I like a lot. I have guys there that work for me in WWE that I have so much respect for. But why they haven't realized you can't be WWE liked.
Right.
If WWE was absolutely rabidly on fire and everything like it was at one point in the Attitude Era was almost selling out automatically, then to emulate that, I could probably buy that. But when a product is still in a transitional period, trying to get guys over and get some new faces elevated, and they're not setting the world on fire at this moment in time, which is not an insult. It's just the way that it is. The business is cyclical. Why one would emulate that is gross stupidity. It makes no sense. I get the same deal when I go on Twitter and I talk about Ring of Honor. I like Ring of Honor. I like Kevin Kelly and Steve Corino's work as announcers. I listen to the announcers. But if I go into if they said we'd like to bring you in as a consultant, I'm not looking for a job, by the way, and whatever you say goes.
Well, don't worry, they're not probably willing to pay you for it, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that their deal, there's some of their issues are easily corrected.
You Twittered this not long ago, and some people talked about it on the internet. Jay, you said you wish some of the guys would slow down and let me talk. Doing.
You know,
some of the fans were like, "Oh my God, he wasn't taking back short boots and wool tights." And no, it's just don't take 16 bumps before I realize that you've fallen down the first time, or don't hit the guy with 7 knockout blows. And I tried the same thing, and and some guys would listen, and some guys are geniuses and the best in the world at being a wrestler who main events in front of 400 people in a rec center and would not take any criticism whatsoever, because it would hinder them. And some of those folks are French Canadian, but I digress.
Well, here's the deal. All they would need to do is hear me do commentary. If we laid out the rules and I went out and did commentary after we had our Cowboy Bill Watts pre-TV meeting, and they ignored my ass because I'm old, crotchety, and Southern, and I am a wrestling guy, then wait till you hear my commentary on your match, asshole. Because when you get on the top rope, when you get on the second rope, and you hit somebody 9 times, and you then ask the audience, should I hit him again, I'm going to make you look like a fool. Because, number one, this so-and-so really needs to work on his. He must have a bad right hand, because he's hit this guy 10 times. I don't see a bruise. I don't see any blood. I don't see any swelling. And I don't know why he's asking the audience if he should hit him the 10th time. I wonder, when he's about to shit his pants, if he asks the guy nearest him, hey, I feel like I'm going to shit myself. Do you think I should go to the bathroom? No, I think you should shit your pants. And that's what he does. When you ask the audience what I should do, you have figuratively shit your pants. And why don't you get that? So, that's then they come to, well, JR, I didn't, you kind of buried me in that match. Yeah, wait till next week. Because if you do it again next week, it's going to be worse. And sooner than later, you're going to have zero value, because when I'm producing the announcers like I did at NXT, and I would be stumped that they were green and they were having a hard time learning, because it's an art form to call a wrestling match, contrary to what some people may think. But the story has to be told. I've used this analogy, and I believe it in all my heart. The wrestlers write the music, the announcers provide the lyrics. If your music sucks, so will my lyrics, more than likely. If you hit I said, well, I had a hard time getting so-and-so through your match. I said, you want to know why? Because they used 7 clotheslines. And I said, I guess those first 6, you just didn't quite hit it in the sweet spot, because he only really took a big bump on the 7th one. So which one is the announcer supposed to sell? 1, 3, 5, 7, the odd numbers, or should we going to go even number this week? I'll sell 2, 4, 6, and 8.
It can happen even to the most experienced guy, because when the Midnight Express and I first got to Mid-South Wrestling, and Bobby Eaton, Mr. Wrestling 2's finish, as you recall, was the $1 million knee lift, and he knocked out everybody with it. That was what he beat everybody with, the $1 million knee lift. Well, he suddenly, when we started working a program with him, found out that Bobby Eaton not only could take the goddamnedest bump from a knee lift that anybody had ever taken in a wrestling ring, but every time he hit him with one, Bobby would take a different kind of bump. One time he would fly over the top rope without touching anything. Another time he would cut a flip inside the ring. Another time he would go face first to the mat and bounce back. These fantastic bumps. And by the first 2 weeks we worked with him, Mr. Wrestling 2 found himself giving his finish to Bobby Eaton like 3 or 4 times in the same match, and then we were still winning the match. And then suddenly it dawned on him, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah, well.
But people can get caught up in it, but that's exactly...
Here's the psychology of that. Here's how corny I would have booked that. I would have let people see the $1 million knee lift, because they quote unquote paid to see the guy's best stuff. But Bobby would have taken a bump right outside.
Yeah.
So then Wrestling 2, then you got Dennis coming in and cutting Wrestling 2 off, or you jumping up on the apron, waving your tennis racket around and raising hell. But Bobby has been knocked to the outside. And, of course, if I'm covering a commentary on a TV match, it's obvious that Wrestling 2 had the match won. It's obvious that Bobby Eaton would no way, no how recover from the $1 million knee lift. It's just unfortunate. There was so much force and impact from it. It knocked Eaton all the way to the floor, and now Bobby's getting the opportunity, thanks to his comrades here, his cohorts in crime, to recover.
What a bad break for Mr. Wrestling 2.
It's a bad break for Wrestling 2, and then when Bobby got his ass back in the ring, guess what Bobby would do? He'd make a tag. and so you protected the hold. You protected Bobby sold. You got heat because you distracted. Dennis got heat because he interfered. Everybody got their bases covered. Everybody enhanced their persona that was cast in that whole equation. So